Okay, receive for government, opposition. Also, government is your team full? Is everyone here?
Yes, everyone's here.
Okay. Opposition, I only see the whip.
Everyone's present. We're sharing devices.
Right. Can you just put your speaking order in the chat? All right. Thank you very much. Hi everyone. Welcome to the grand finals of Interpasum Debate Championship 2022. On side government, we have the team Gryffindor, and on side opposition, we have the team Shrek Opinionators. I'd like to have, I'd like to congratulate both teams for making it all the way, and good luck to both teams for the grand finals. On the motion that this House believes that a meaningful life is one lived in resistance to death, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister. Yes, timekeeper, we can go live now. Oh, we're already live. Yeah. Prime Minister, whenever you're ready.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning I bid to the honorable educators, fellow teammates, opponents, and also members of the floor. So today we are debating on the motion that this House believes that a meaningful life is one lived in resistance to death. So today as the Prime Minister, I will be doing three things in my speech today. Firstly, I will be giving characterizations to some of the words in the motion that are very critical in this debate today. Secondly, I will be giving our burdens that we want to prove, and I will also be giving out some burdens that our opponents have to prove as well. And thirdly, I will be giving one argument to strengthen our case. Next, my second speaker will give rebuttals to what the leader of opposition will have to say, and he will also give a few arguments to further strengthen our case. And thirdly, my whip will state the clashes and issues and prove to you why we win this debate today. Okay, so firstly, in this motion, a few words that are very important to characterize. First is resistance. In this case, we characterize resistance as the act of fighting against something. So when we say resistance to death, that means we live a life. We understand what death is. It is not that we don't accept death. We understand what death is, but we try to live our life in resisting it. We resist death whenever we live. Okay. Secondly, is the phrase of meaningful life. Okay, so meaningful life, the way we characterize it, as the government characterizes it, is basically meaningful life means to live to fully live a life that has no regrets in your life. Okay, so what do I mean by regrets? So basically, these regrets, when I say that meaningful life is a life fully lived without regrets, means that well, regrets here mean that you feel something that you feel like you did not do, you feel bad because you did not do. In, for example, you wanted to try the bungee jumping or something and you did not do it. So then what will happen here is that you will always feel this feeling of unhappiness or feeling of like something bothering you, that like why did I not do it, why didn't I try it. So with that feeling, we think that regrets here, when you have regrets, it also means this, when you have this feeling of unhappy with your life, that means you did not live your life to the fullest. You did not live your life 100% the way you wanted it to. So in that case, it becomes a not meaningful life. Okay. So a few burdens here that we want to prove here today. Firstly, sorry, I would like to also say that opposition will have to fight. We have to mention about living a life with accepting death. When you accept death, uh, it is basically a state of thinking that death will always happen. Okay, they have to. This is what the opponent has to prove. Okay, so a few burdens from our side is basically first resistance to death. We will prove how resistance to death will actually bring meaning to life. Secondly, our second burden is we prove how fear of fear of death will lead to living in fear. And thirdly, we will prove that living in resistance to death will allow more contributions to society. Okay, so uh, a few burdens that the opposition has to prove here today is basically first, how can living in the fear of death lead a meaningful life? Secondly, how can living in fear of death also lead a life with no regrets? That is what they have to prove here today. Okay, so uh, before moving on, I just want to clarify that one thing that is when we say resist to death, it is not that we it means that we do not fear death. We are brave enough to face death, to resist it. Okay, that means we live our life to the fullest, and we keep on fighting against death because we know, although death might happen, we say it's okay. We say goodbye. Sorry, we say it's okay. I will still do what I want. Okay, so under answering the first burden under why living in why living in resistance to death gives meaning to life. Okay, so basically,
Your eyes
when
have
we live, not now, when we live our life, when we live our life with resistance to death, I said just now, we want to live a meaningful life. This meaningful life is basically you do not want regrets. Okay, so when we have this when we are fearless of death, okay, we will have this ability to try new things, all these new things that people who are afraid of death will never be able to try. For example, there are lots of extreme sports, for example like bungee jumping, or maybe like extreme biking or hiking or whatever like that. We think that when you live a life in this fear, with the fear of death, you will never be able to do these things. You will never be able to do this thing because you are scared that you might die. Whereas on our side, we think that when we are not scared of death, we will be able to do these things. And okay, why is it really important that we do these things? Is because when we do these things that we wanted to try so much, we will not have any regrets left in our life. And as I said before, why regrets is very important. Why having no regrets is important is because, yeah, as I said before, we should not live a life with regrets. So living with regrets means that we have not lived our life to the fullest, as I said before. Okay, so basically, with all these new experiences, with being brave enough to try everything, we get all of these experiences. Okay, and then this will also help us break out of our comfort zone. In when we are not scared of this death, okay, we try all these new things, and then we can practice, we can do all these new things, and we will not live in our comfort zone, because in this comfort zone we do things that are like safe that we normally do. But once we leave our comfort zone, we can actually find out all of these hidden abilities that we have, all of these other things that we could have never experienced if we were not brave enough to try. So when we get out of our comfort zone, it will result to having better people, better. We have better skills, we have better experiences. We can, we have good, lots of good can come from coming out of your comfort zone. So what have I told you today? I have told you why living a life with regret is not a meaningful life, and also why we stand with the motion that when we are fearless of death, we think that it is a very meaningful life uh, because that we will be brave enough to try anything and live out of our comfort zone. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. Now I'd like to invite Leader of Opposition here.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll start my speech in three, two, one. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think different people have a different definition to what meaningful life is. But what on our opposition side agree is that living a life in resistance to death does not create a meaningful life. So, first of all, let's go down to my structure, how I will structure my speech. Firstly, I will rebut the argument or substantive given by the side of government, and secondly, I will tell you what is the right way to live a life and what does a meaningful life looks like, and thirdly, several arguments or substantive coming from outside. Now, without further ado, let's dive right into my speech. Firstly, the rebuttals. What the government side said just now is that their definition of resistance to death is not resisting death. What their definition was resistance to death, meaning that they're living without the fear of death. I think even from the get-go, they have failed to understand the spirit of the motion. Resistance to death means that you are living in trying to avoid death as best as possible. It looks like you're trying to live as long as possible. What their side has to prove is that living forever is the life that has the most meaning. That is what the government side has to prove. What our side has to prove is that trying to avoid we're not supposed to resist death. Instead, we're supposed to accept that death is a part of life, and death is what gives life meaning. So that's the burden of proof that was the burden that was supposed to be proven by both sides. So I think even from the get-go, the government side failed to understand what they're supposed to do, and what they did, what their case was, consisted of them trying to prove that accepting death is something that is good, which is them directly supporting the opposition side, even from the prime minister. So that's done with the first rebuttal. Secondly, they said that a life worth living is a life without regrets. I think that a meaningful life does not have to, even if you have regret, is that it does not reduces the value that you have in life. Because I think that regret from not being able to do something does not stick with you forever. I think what a meaningful life truly means is that you're able to live a life towards its fullest extent, without any restriction, without any forms of fear, without being scared of death. That is what the meaningful life means on our side. We believe meaningful life means that a life that you can live with liberty and freedom, without any forms of restriction, without fearing death. So that's done with my rebuttal. Now let's move on to what we have to prove in today's debate. So on our side, what we have to prove is that living without any forms of fear, with living in freedom and living in with liberty, gives life its meaning. What the opposition side has to prove is that why living with resistance to death, living trying to live long as possible gives the life its value. So that's what both sides have to prove. Done with the burden of proof, now let's move on to my arguments. So why resistance to death creates fear in individuals? So ladies and gentlemen, when you try to resist death, it creates a fear in your life that one day that you will die, one day that your life will end. So you will do your best to try resisting death. In what it looks like is that you're not able to experience life to the fullest. You will always stay in your comfort zone. You're not able to experience things in the outside world, because why? You're scared of death. You are trying to resist it as best as possible. You would live your life being a normal person, doing normal things, doing boring things. You don't get to experience life. You don't explore. You don't meet out with new people. You don't explore new things, try out new activities. That is what your life looks like when you are trying to resist death. It looks like you're not trying to experience the things that are existing in the world in the first place. But why is this? It does not has any meaning, because death is inevitable, because your struggles to resist death, to avoid death, would be worthless, and your effort to live longer does not have any value. Instead, what we believe that you should do is just live your life with freedom, without any restriction, without any fear of death. Because why? Because death is inevitable. It's better for you to just accept it and know that one day your life will end. Might as well just do everything that you can in your life. Make the most of it. And now let's look at what their meaning of life looks like. When they say that meaningful life is life lived in resistance to death, it means that the life that is best lived is a life that is endless, meaning that immortality has the most meaning in life. Now let's look at why this is wrong. When you live forever, it takes away the value in life. When you live forever, everything comes and go, and everything is temporary, and you will realize that you are nothing and nothing has value to you. When you live forever, you will realize that the world is empty and sorrow, because you will never be able to enjoy anything, because without death, life loses its value. We think that death is a part of life, and life without death, life is incomplete. So when you take away death from life, it takes away the value from life. So we think that in resisting death, you essentially are taking away the meaning of life itself, and you make everything that you are doing in this world meaningless. So I think that when you are living in resistance to death, you would create a fear that you would not be able to enjoy life, because you one day that you might your life might end anytime and anywhere. You might be scared of getting into an accident. You might be scared of getting killed by someone. Any forms of occurrences would create your would make your life miserable, and you won't be able to enjoy life. So then with my substantive, now let's look at what I've stated in my speeches now. So I've tell you what the meaning of life actually is. Meaningful life means that you are able to live a life with liberty, with freedom, without any form of fear. And why living in resistance to death takes away value in life, because it is pointless. In one day you will die, because death is inevitable. And while living forever, being successfully resisting death would essentially take away the value from your life. How like everything will has no value to you, and life will no longer have any forms of value. The only thing that you would want when you live forever is to have to die. So realize that death is a part of life, and without death, life loses its meaning. So if you want to create a world where people have live and enjoy their life, don't create a world where people are scared. Create a world where people are encouraged to do whatever they want, because they are able to live their life to the fullest. With that, I've never been prouder to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. Now I'd like to invite Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Okay, a very good morning to everyone present. So today I'm as the deputy. Hey, can you guys hear me? Yeah. But what are you doing? Okay. As the deputy prime minister today, here is how I'm going to structure my speech. So first, I'm going to provide some rebuttals to the government, and I'm going to give our points of arguments to further strengthen our beliefs. So first, the opposition are actually debating in their own bubble, and they are being delusional. They don't listen to what what the prime minister has said just now, and because we actually already categorize resistance to death is actually fighting something, not avoiding death. And we say that we totally understand that death will happen and it is part of the life cycle. And as the opposition, they should engage with us, and they actually failed to clarify this. And they should also prove that why living in fear of death is actually good for us. Okay, so moving on to my point of argument. Okay, so we understand that death, everyone understand that death will come as it is part of the life cycle. And we are pushing on why we should go against or have resistance to death to have a more meaningful life. So basically the saying that goes like living today as if tomorrow we are going to die is very, very wrong. Because this is actually instilling fear. Actually, this is instilling fear to people because they're going to have a narrow mindset about, because I fear to death, I fear to die, so I'm going to avoid any situation that will risk me to die. Okay, so this will lead them to not do certain things, and we should actually know that everyone is only going to be living their life once. And so if we actually miss out on all this life, then our life will not be meaningful and will not be complete. We will actually miss out on so many things in life. For example, extreme sports and also activities. These are the kinds of activities that everyone who are capable should at least experience once in their life and be on their bucket list, because when we die, we will definitely regret it because we didn't do it in the first place. So basically, if we have the fear of dying, then we will lose the enthusiasm of doing these kinds of things. For example, about extreme sports and those activities are jungle hiking, climbing mountains, and also bungee jumping. Okay, so if we live, if we are living in fear of death, then that means that even though if like we want to do those extreme sports that we want, but because of fearing to die, then we will have no choice but to abort this. Okay, so basically our life will be less meaningful if we actually have this kind of feeling. So to live our life in the fullest, to have a more meaningful life, we should not live in fear of, we should not bother the fear of dying, so that our life, so that we will live, our life will be more fun and more colorful. Okay, so moving on. To that, moving on to my next point argument, which is more contribution to the society. So, if everyone is living a life that they actually understand but don't fear to die, then this will definitely contribute a lot to the society. For example, these people can take up jobs like jobs that are dangerous, for example, policemen and also firefighters. And these kinds of jobs, everyone knows that is very dangerous and they are putting their lives at risk all the time. But we have to look at the bigger picture. We have to think about how much this will benefit us, how much benefit this will we were able to rake in. Okay, so if we actually fear and bother about dying, then we will tend to avoid these kinds of jobs because we don't want to die, and these jobs are very risky. So, what will be the consequences? Safety problems will definitely afloat, like criminals, because there will be no more policemen. There will be no more brave people that do not fear to die to actually step up to take up the job as a policeman to ensure our safety. And more lives will be in danger because no one dares to risk their life to help others because of fearing to die. Okay, like firefighters. Okay, so I have a scenario here. So what if a boy is drowning and there is only us? There's only one person, which is us at that place, and we saw that the boy is drowning. And what we will do? If we are the person that are actually fear of dying, then we will definitely just see that boy drown to death, which is very very wrong. So we should actually don't ha- we should actually abolish this kind of feeling and save that boy, because we have to think about how this will benefit the society. Think about how people will respect us even if we eventually die because of saving that boy and whatnot. Okay, people will respect us, our name will be sung, and so on. Okay, so have I raised my case, and I feel more prouder to propose. Hereby end my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for that speech. Now I'd like to invite Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Good morning. I would like to bid to the panel of educators and members of the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, what government had failed to do from the beginning, from the Prime Minister, from the Deputy Prime Minister, is that they failed to clarify how do you live a fearless life if you're resisting death? How do you fail to live? How do you live a meaningful life if you're resisting death? Their definition of fighting means them trying not to lose against death. But this, as a whole, contradicts their cases. And even if their argument is taken into consideration, then they are basically running the opposition show for us. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now move on to my arguments. What the government had failed to do is that they they failed to say why, how resist. They were supposed to say that resisting death means living, as my leader of opposition said, resisting that is meaning that they live forever, and that they are resisting death as a whole, and without death, that immortality is the most important aspect of life. This is what the government supposedly said from the beginning, but they have completely disregarded the motion of today, which is this house belief that a meaningful life is one lived in resistance to get to death. Without restriction, life can be experienced to the fullest, because if one is afraid to live out life out of their comfort zone, then they will not be able to experience new things such as extreme sports like bungee jumping or skydiving, because in their head that there will always be that this nagging thought that if they go on to do something extreme or dangerous, like for example, like I say, bungee jumping, that would always be lurking around the corner. For our case, on the opposition side, we are creating individuals who can do whatever they want and pursue their dreams and passions, and that these individuals can go on to live life with no restriction and freedom and liberty. Yes, we agree that in our worst case scenario that it is something that goes wrong when pursuing life, it will end in death. But government case isn't any better. Government would want individuals on their side to live a life in resistance, always fearing death until it constricts one life to the safety of their comfort zone. We on the opposition side has accepted that death is a part of life, and that death is inevitable, and that by doing what we want without restriction is a life lived to the fullest, and this is what we characterize as a meaningful life. At the very least, the individuals on our side has led a meaningful life, one without resisting death, which is what is happening on the government side. Without restriction, life can be experienced to the fullest. Imagine a world where we are constantly worrying about that, where we are walking the street, worrying that we might end up dead because of an accident, because we might get robbed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a life that we shouldn't live, and this is what government is supposed to push through. But what they are doing is that they're contradicting themselves. They are running parallel to our cases, and they keep on saying, from the prime minister, from the deputy prime minister, they keep on going on about how life resisting that is actually living a meaningful life. But what they fail to do is that they fail to clarify that how do you live a fearless life if you're always resisting death? So I would like to say that living life in freedom and liberty is what makes individuals happy, and by living a free life without restriction is what makes us as people. Because if we're not living a life full of a life that is fulfilling, then what is a meaningful life? We have to question that, and government has failed again to say that living a meaningful life is one lived in resistance to death. But us, we on the opposition side, we are pushing forward that a meaningful life shouldn't be one lived in resistance, but instead it should be a life lived doing what you love most without restriction, and so that it will become a more fulfilling and meaningful life. And I would like to recap my speech. So from the beginning, I would say by my rebuttals that the government, once again, has failed to understand the motion of today, and they are debating against the spirit of the motion. They are basically contradicting themselves, and it makes their argument from the get-go irrelevant, and it shouldn't be taken into consideration in this debate today, because what they're saying is they are basically running our case for us, and it has proven that at this point that the opposition side has truly won this debate. And in my arguments, I would like to say that without restriction, life can be experienced to the fullest. And with that, I will say that if you want individuals in society to live a more meaningful life, then you would side with the side of opposition. And with that, I would like to rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Now calling upon Government Whip. Here.
Before I start, can you hear me clearly?
Yep, loud and clear.
In order for a debate to actually progress, both sides have to engage with each other, whether you like it or not. That is something I would like to remind side opposition for you in your remaining two speakers. No matter what you say about how you disagree with our characterizations, how you disagree with every single characterization we have, in order for this debate to actually be a debate, you have to talk with us, you have to engage with us either way. You don't come up and say that, oh, this is how we characterize it, so this is the only way we believe this debate is going to go. That is not how a debate works, and I have so many reasons as to prove you why. So first of all, I'm going to start with my rebuttals to prove why, first of all, what opposition should actually be doing. Secondly, to prove how the contradiction happens from their side, not ours. And third, I'm going to move on to my clashes, where, to be honest, they aren't that much because side opposition has not been engaging with us at all. And last but not least, to paint a picture and to compare paradigms and to prove as to why government has won this debate since the start of their leader of opposition. So first of all, what is opposition supposed to be doing? When your leader of opposition came up and talked about our characterization, we understand the fact that, yes, in opposition, you can disagree with the characterization. However, we have clearly stated about what we're expecting from you. You have to understand that as an opposition, as a good opposition, you're supposed to deny what we're saying by coming up and engaging with our points. You're not supposed to come up and bring your own points and make your own discussion without wanting to engage with us. You have to understand that as a role of opposition, you have already failed since the first speaker. First of all, you're supposed to prove to us as to why we're living in fear of death, when you know that death is a scary thing, is going to lead to a better life compared to living in resistance to death. We have already clarified in my first and second speaker clearly as to what we define of resistance to death and what we define as a meaningful life. You have to understand that you have to adhere to our characterizations as well, and you have to engage with us. No matter how much you disagree, you still have to engage and you still have to prove your points. For now, all you're doing is technically you're taking all of our points and you're putting into your side of opposition. Why not all of us just hold hands, sit in a ring, and say, yes, we agree to the motion? Easy. So next, to start with, the deputy leader of opposition talked about how contradictions here and there inside government. I would like to remind you guys, to start opposition, look back at your notes, look back at all the things that you jotted from us, and see who is actually contradicting who. What we'd like to tell you is that we already gave you a clear definition on what resistance means, on what resistance to death means. So because we've given you these clear characterizations, you have to debate based on this, and you have to stop contradicting yourself by bringing up our case. You can't tell us that, oh, they're running our case when we were the ones who characterized and structured the debate first. So next, moving on to my rebuttals. Main rebuttals. So when the leader of opposition came up and said that side government is actually dismissing the idea of death, you're taking away death from the circle of life, that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is, we stated in my prime minister clearly stated that we understand the idea of death. However, we resist it, which means we want to fight back against the idea of death. We're not taking away death from the equation. We don't feel like we're going to live immortally. We think that it's better to live a life where we want to fight back against death, not where we're living a life where we fear death, or where we're scared of death to the point where we don't want to do anything. And I'll prove that more in my clashes. Secondly, once again, how we are not fearing death. I don't know how many times we need to clarify this to you, but once again, we are not fearing death on the government side. What we are doing is we understand what death is, and we want to fight back against that idea, which is why we've proven to you in my first and second speaker about how technically about how not fearing death is the way to live your life. What you're doing under opposition, you're supposed to be fighting about how fearing death is the better option than resisting death. So technically, this debate is going to be a huge mess, and it already is, because none of the sides are we aren't able to find anything from opposition, because opposition has been going on and on about how, oh, our side is wrong, this side is supposed to be right. That's not the case here. I'm expecting more engagement, so I can't really prove anything in my clashes. So first clash that I would like to prove in this debate: under which side is life lived with more meaning and no regrets? On the government side, my Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister gave you concrete points about how living a life with resistance to death means living a life with no restrictions, living a life with no. We think that meaningful life is a life with no regrets, and we believe that it's better to live a life that is not on constant autopilot. So what we think about this is, when you live in resistance to death, meaning where you want to fight back death, is you're not afraid or you're not bothered by the fear of death. When you do something, you're not bothered or constantly thinking about how scary death is. You live your life. Technically, it's an easier way to say you only live once. Technically, what we're doing here is we think that life is lived with more meaning when you're not constantly bothered and terrified of the idea of death, even if not necessarily pointing to extreme examples such as bungee jumping, but doing anything you like, really. If you're constantly bothered by the fear of death, you constantly think that, oh, someday I'm going to die, why live my life like this? Why not just live how I am and just let things be? No, we believe that if you live if you live with a resistance to death, which means you're willing to fight back against the idea of death, you're willing to go out of your comfort zone, you're willing to prove you're willing to live a life where you're not as comfortable as you are. You're willing to do things outside of your comfort zone. That's what we think is happening under side government, and why we've proven already to you why a meaningful life is lived under our characterization. So the second clash, which leads to a safer and more positive mindset: resistance to death or fear of death. So under government, I don't know how many times I have to just emphasize this, but just in case the opposition whip comes up and characterizes it differently, once again, I like to remind that this is our characterization, that resisting death means we understand the concept of death, just that we want to fight against the idea of death, because we've already characterized what resistance is. So because we are not bothered by the idea of death, this would lead to a more positive mindset. And how is this possible? Because we believe that we're able to, if we're not constantly held back by the constant fear of death, or the constant we're not bothered by the fear of death, we'd be able to go out of our comfort zone, and we'd be able to do things that we didn't think we'd possibly do. Like technically, we think that we'd be able to do anything. That's what we characterize. But under side opposition, they think that accepting the idea of death, which means that they are constantly bothered by the fear of death, is something good, because they think that it's going to be, even if they come out and say that, oh, it's safer for us, it's more logical, we think that if you live a life constantly bothered by the fear of death, you aren't living your best life, because you'd be more pessimistic and you'd feel more negative about life. So to paint an easy picture, technical wise, opposition has already failed to even come up with an entire case, because their case is literally the same as ours, and they have failed to prove to us why living in fear of death instead of resisting it is better than our side, and they haven't proved to us why meaningful life should not be characterized by this. So under government, we have proven to you multiple points as to why living in resistance to death would lead to a more meaningful life, and how and if you like to side with the side that understands the true debate and actually wants to debate with other teams, please side with side government. Thank you.
Thank you, Government Whip. Now I'd like to invite Opposition Whip.
Thank you for that speech. Now calling upon Opposition Whip. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, there was a saying by a person that you live once, but you die twice. Once is when you stop breathing, and the second time is when someone says your name for the last time. And I expected more from side government, since this is a philosophical themed debate. However, they insisted on
emphasizing on the physical aspect of death. And so side opposition did roll with that, and we went with the flow. We engaged. We tried to engage, but it seems like side government is running opposition's case for us. So first of all, I would like to structure my speech today. First of all, I will be providing clarifications. Second, I will be going into rebuttals from first speaker government up to third speaker government. Thirdly, I would like to show you why our side opposition has definitely and obviously won today's debate. And lastly, I would provide my clashes followed by my conclusion for today's debate. So, first of all, clarifications. As we all saw and witnessed, government did not set up much of a case from the get-go. Resistance to death, they failed to understand the spirit of the motion. They even misunderstood the meaning of resistance as a whole. Resistance to death, meaning that you have resistance to death, meaning that you are afraid in living, afraid to come head to head with death, that you want to avoid death. However, that was not side government's case. So side government was trying to push the idea of fighting death. How exactly do you fight death? Yes, you accept that death is inevitable, but fighting death, what do you mean by fighting death? Constantly thinking of death. Living in fear, as what the DPM had stated in his previous speech, is good for us. How living in fear equates to living a meaningful life, I do not even understand. So, moving on to my rebuttals. It's basically rehashing what my previous speakers on side opposition has said, since there is not much substance in the debate to begin with, since side government had really failed to structure their case from the get-go. So the PM stated that resistance to death gives meaning to life, and that they live life to the fullest, and they are fearless of death. Okay, that was what the Prime Minister said. They are fearless of death, and they will have no regrets living their life. And when they leave their comfort zone, they will garner experience, and become better people, have better experiences. Well, that started off as fearless towards death, and then, however, in DPM speech, they said that living in fear of death is good for us. So it's quite a contradiction there. So we really don't know which side government is actually on, since their case is full of inconsistencies and contradictions. So rehashing. Resistance to death means that you're not accepting death as a part of life on side government, whereas on side opposition, our side accepts accepts death as a part of life. It is the complement to life, and it is included in the cycle of life. With death, life will exist, and with life, death will surely come inevitably. I'll give you an example. When someone dies, a physical aspect of death, when something dies, it can become fertilizer and nourishment to other forms of life. So, from side government, essentially, death is something that is the end of everything. So on side opposition, we understand the meaning of death better, and we integrate that into what is life, what is a meaningful life holistically. So moving on to DPM, I have already rebutted, and moving on to the third speaker of side government. She said that we did not engage with their case. However, we say that we tried to engage with their case, only that their case is running parallel to ours, that they are fighting the same goals as us as side opposition. They are running side opposition's case, and we are totally confused with their stance. First, they say that they live without fear to death, and then secondly, they said that they living in fear to death is good for them. So we are engaging, we are correcting the misconceptions provided by side government. And so why our side had won in today's debate is, first of all, side government failed to characterize and define the motion accordingly. They misunderstood the spirit of the motion. They failed to come up with relevant burdens of proof. They failed to come up with how resisting life or living in fear, as I quote DPM, is good for us. And what they had to prove to us was how living in fear equates to a meaningful life. There was not much substance to this debate. So moving on to my clashes is that, first of all, we prove to you why which side better portrays a meaningful life holistically better. And the second clash would be which side is better in fear of death or accepting death to live a meaningful life. So first of all, government literally said living life in fear is good for us, and living in fear equates to a meaningful life. So basically what we're trying to say on side government is that death is something that living with the thought, the correct mindset towards death will actually, the positive outlook towards death will actually help you live life better, life to the fullest extent. So we won that first clash. And for the second clash, which side is better, in fear of death or accepting death to live a meaningful life? And we obviously, our side opposition has won that clash in today's debate. So ladies and gentlemen, if you want a world where the government doesn't misunderstand the meaning of resistance to death, or clearly do not understand the meaning of resistance to death, please side with side opposition, because we provide a world where the society has a better outlook of life and death. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Opposition Whip. Now I'd like to invite Opposition Reply.
Thank you for that speech. Now inviting the last speaker of opposition, opposition reply. Here.
Am I audible? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, you're audible.
All right. So I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, what was supposed to be a philosophical debate turns out to be a grammatical debate, all because the government side failed to understand what resistance means. So I think we can all agree resistance simply means that you are trying to fight against it. You are not trying to lose towards it. So when you are trying to resist that, it simply means that you are trying to live longer. You are trying to live without death. The meaning or the spirit of the debate means that a meaningful life is a life that when you don't die, when you resist death. In what world does fighting means that you are accepting death? When you are accepting that is a part of life, it just simply means that you are no longer resisting it. You are accepting, and you are just trying to live a life with the mindset that, oh, one day you are going to die. I think that's the misconception that is coming from the government side. Even from the get-go, they failed to understand what they're supposed to defend. They failed to understand what is the spirit of the motion. They failed to understand the goal of the government side. So on our side, however, we have proven to the House how the resistance to death is not something that you want. A meaningful life is a life where you live with liberty and freedom, a life where you live without a fear of death. You accept that death is a part of life, and with that you live your life with the thought that one day you will die. That is the case coming from the opposition side. So now let's look at, in summary, what have both sides given. I think that the problem coming from the government side is the whole case they are running is they are running the opposition's case. Therefore, they are contradicting themselves. They are contradicting what they're supposed to prove. Therefore, they have failed even from the get-go. We think that what that has to prove is that while living longer, give life more value, which is something that they fail to do even from the Prime Minister, and they continue to defend it even until the final speaker credit for being consistently wrong. But I think they have been wrong throughout all three speakers. What our side has proven is that when you live a life without fear of death, you live your life to the fullest, then you will be able to live your life and experience all wonders of life. You will be able to live your life happily, enjoy the little things, and you are able to go out of your comfort zone and so on. We also have proven why that living longer does not give life any value. For example, if you are able to resist death, even if you are able to do the impossible and live forever, you will start to realize that life has no meaning if death is not existed. You will realize that without death, life loses its meaning, and you would tend to realize that the only reason why we are able to enjoy life is because one day it is going to end. We also stated how that freedom and liberty is the when you are able to live your life with freedom and without constriction, you are able to experience life to the fullest. It gives life the most value. So we think that on our side, we are able to give a clear characterization of what the motion wants, and we are able to prove we are able to fulfill the objective of our side. However, the government side has failed from the get-go to understand what the debates want, and they continuously go on the same thing, supporting the opposition side and contradicting with their case as a whole. So we think that the government side has failed to do what they're supposed to do, which is defend the motion. So we think that with that, the opposition side has won this debate, and I've never been prouder to oppose. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that speech. And now, wrapping up this debate, calling upon government reply. Here.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon, I bid, to the adjudicators, opponents, teammates, and also members of the floor. So, sadly, very, very regrettably, I have to say that today's debate was such a mess. Why was it such a mess here? Okay, what happened here is that the opposition side has failed to understand the motion. They failed to understand the motion, and they failed to even listen to us explain. Whenever we explain, whenever we try to say why this motion is like this, they keep saying, okay, no, you're wrong, and we're right. They kept on saying that again and again and again. And even if we were wrong, they never provided why we were wrong. They just kept on living in their own bubble. They kept on trying to try to give their own definition, even though we have clearly characterized it earlier. We told them, and this is a recurring issue, non-stop. It has been happening throughout the debate, throughout the first speaker of opposition, second speaker, third speaker. All of them say that when we reach death, we are fearful of death. But in my first speech, I have clarified this 100% clearly, that when we fear that, when we resist death, okay, we resist the idea of death. That means we are fearless of death. We fight against the idea of death. It's not that we do not understand it. It's not we do not accept it. We know that it will happen, but we believe that we will fight against this idea. We will fight against death. We will be brave to do anything that we want to do. And this is what they do not get. They keep on insisting upon that kind of idea. They keep on insisting that understand that we do not understand. And the real understanding is we are supposed to have people who are scared of death all the time. But no, that is not the case. When we resist something, when we fight against something, okay, let me give you an example, okay? In a war, when you resist, when you are the resistance, when you fight against people, you are the resistance of a bad movement or something. When you are the resistance, do you fear Do you fear your opponent? No. You are brave and fearless to fight against them. This is what it means to be fearless and to resist death in itself. This is the problem with government here. Sorry, this is the problem with opposition here. They fail to understand and they do not want to understand. Even though we have clarified, I have clarified, my second speaker clarified, my whip also clarified. They all do not understand. That is the problem here. Secondly, another problem here, they say that we think, they kept on insisting that we say that we do not accept death. But we have never said in any of our speeches, whether from my speech, my second speaker speech, or my whip speech, we never said that we do not accept death. We said that death will happen. Okay, you kept on saying that, okay, death is a cycle of life, and we accept it. It's not like we say death will not happen. We do not want death to happen. No, what we're simply doing is resisting the death. We're resisting. We're trying to resist death itself and trying to fight against it so that we can live a life with while being more brave and such. Okay. So what has been wrong in this debate is basically we have been trying to engage, we have been trying to give out our points, we have trying to characterize, but the opposition keeps on trying to twist our words and suddenly taking our case. This is the problem with their side. They take our case and they say that we are wrong. Like this is not the case. This is not public speaking where you can say whatever you want to say. This is the problem. They keep on taking our case and say it's theirs. Okay, this is totally not the case. And last but not least, the whip. I would like to say something that the whip has said. They said that we clash, we contradict with ourselves. But I want to say clearly that in the first speech, I talked about how why resisting death is good, and about the DPM said why living in fear of death is living in fear is because that one is to show the bad effects of not resisting death, of accepting death. So when you accept death, you will know death will happen all the time. So you will be scared, and you have lots of fear to when it comes to death. So you will not be able to do much. And with that, I've never been prouder to propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that speech, and this marks the end of the finals of the Interpasum Debate Championship. You may cross the floor and shake hands. Thank you for the debate, and we will see you at the closing ceremony at 3 p.m., where we will announce the results. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.